What is your favorite smell? If you had to, here's what I want to do. I want you to think for just a second about what your favorite smell, your favorite fragrance or aroma is, and then I'm going to ask us all to shout it out at one time, okay? I'm going to give you on the count of 3, we're all going to shout out what your favorite smell, be nice now. What your favorite smell, what your very favorite fragrance or aroma is. 1, 2, 3, shout it out. Oh, that sounded unified. I'm telling you, that was certainly a voice of unity. You know, certain fragrances, whenever or smells, bring back memories of my childhood. We're going to talk today about childhood and families, and certain things that I smell. Diane will put a pot roast and potatoes and carrots and onions in a crock pot and cook it literally all day, and my office is at home, and it just about drives me nuts. And it reminds me of growing up, because my mother also would do that and leave it going all day. Or sometimes when I start a pot of fresh coffee, it'll remind me of my father sitting at the kitchen table on a cold morning back in Tennessee, drinking a cup of coffee, and the aroma will just take me back 50 plus years. There's so many smells. Diane often makes banana bread for the grandchildren, and that smell will remind me of my mother making banana bread all through the house. And we are prone to have memories that are tied to smells. Even as I say that, some of you said Christmas, a Christmas smell. We are prone to have great memories of various smells. Family remembrances can have a lot to do with our 5 senses, but they can also have a lot to do with the 3 legacies of any family: the emotional legacy of a family, the social legacy of a family, and the spiritual legacy of a family. Every family has those 3. They may not be good, they may be bad, but every family leaves behind 3 legacies: a social legacy, an emotional legacy, and a spiritual legacy. I'm afraid that what has happened so often in our country today with the changing value system is that every passing year, the spiritual legacy part gets a little less. And so what we're going to talk about this morning is how to have healthy family fragrances that will contribute to a wonderful home. And I've decided to call the fragrance 5 the aroma and put it in an acrostic just because I like acrostics. And one of them ain't going to fit at all, but I don't care. But to put it in an acrostic so that it will be easier for all of us to remember these 5 aromas that make up a healthy spiritual family. And the first fragrance is affection. Displaying affection for those we love is a vital part of a strong family heritage. Sure, we must say that we love them, but it's better to show it as well. Touch is a tangible reminder of love. And you know what? We used to not think that. My parents did not touch me much at all. My parents had grown up at an age where theirs didn't either. My grandfather was born in 1900, and it was a different time, and people thought differently back then. You thought you made a man tough by never hugging them, never showing any affection or any emotion. So my father grew up under his father, and you can have that just, you see, that line coming along, no affection, no touch. And so I really don't ever remember either my mother or my father hugging me until the last days of her life, the last few years of her life. Now, some of you are the same way because that's the way things were. I never questioned whether they loved me or not. I'm just saying there wasn't much affection, outward affection, or touch. And the interesting thing is, we've learned a lot about this in the last 20 or 25 years. We've learned a lot about it through various psychological testing and studies, as well as medical testing and studies. And so we've learned just how important touch is in the life of a child, to the degree that almost all hospitals now have a position known as cuddlers or huggers. We have some in our church who fill this role, cuddlers or huggers. And they go in, and what the science showed was that if a newborn infant, days after it was born, particularly those who have struggled a little, maybe they were born premature or they've had some sort of physical problem that have kept them in the hospital for a while, that this child gets better physically and emotionally if it is held for 45 minutes consecutively. 45 minutes. So we have people in our church who go and they will hold a child for 45 minutes consecutively and touch and sing to it. And then they'll get another child for another 45 minutes, because we've learned just how much touch and affection means in the social and emotional life of a child. What we just did is so important to show children that we care about them and to show some affection for our children. And children in church need to know they're cared about just like adults do. Children in church need to know they're a part of the church just like adults do. And so often what I hear is, well, I just don't feel like I used to in my family, so it's hard for me to show affection or to show love. Now listen to me carefully. And some of you who've been around for a few years are getting tired of hearing me say this, because some of you have heard me say this probably 100 or more times. But I'm going to keep saying it until we do it. Feelings follow actions, not the other way around. You feel your way into acting. You almost never, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. You act your way into feeling. You almost never feel your way into acting. You don't. You act your way into feeling. You may not feel like being affectionate or being kind or being compassionate or being forgiving at a particular moment in your family. You feel like striking back, or you feel like giving the silent treatment, or you feel like being unmerciful at the moment. But if you will act, you will find that the feelings will follow the actions. But actions will not follow feelings. So you can't use the cop-out, I don't feel like showing affection right at this moment. You need to act and demonstrate love so the feelings will come. That's biblical. That's exactly what that verse says. Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let's show the truth by our actions. You are acting your way into saying. You are acting your way into feeling. And it's so important that we cultivate an atmosphere of love, a fragrance of affection, touch in your home by showing and telling your family members that you love and accept them. The second part of our acrostic in the aroma of a family is respect. Billy Graham was right when he said a child who is allowed to be disrespectful to his parents will not have true respect for anyone else either. If a child is allowed to be disrespectful for his parents, he will not truly respect anybody. If there is anything that should be built into the fabric of every family, it is respect for the individual, starting with mom and dad. Now, I'm not talking about awe. I'm not talking about reverence. I'm not talking about invulnerability. I'm not talking about perfection. I'm talking about respect. in which we honor the worth of others. And there are at least two kinds of respect that we simply must reinforce at home. One of them is entitled respect. Entitled respect is what is commanded by a person's position. And here's what the Bible commands to children. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. Here's what the Bible says about respecting your political leaders, your kings, and your presidents. In Romans chapter 13, it says, obey them. And in 1 Timothy chapter 2, it says, pray for them no matter who they are. And at the time that scripture was written, one of the most wicked emperors of all time was in office, Nero. Yet, we were told to respect and pray for our presidents and kings. And then we're told in the church, in Hebrews 13:17, obey your spiritual leaders and do what they say. Their work is to watch over your souls, and they are accountable to God. Give them reason to do this with joy and not with sorrow. That would certainly not be for your benefit. So understand with me for a moment this. God ordained and began three institutions: the home, the family, government, and the church. The home, government, and the church. In the home, he said, children, honor and obey your parents in the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. In the government, he said, pray for and obey your leaders and your kings and your presidents. In the church, he said, pray for your elders and shepherds and those who have watch over you and obey them. Respect for position, that is entitled respect. And that's what we must teach our kids, entitled respect. And I'm afraid we are losing a lot of that in all three of those areas. If you want to be a biblically based Christian, you have to focus on teaching your children entitled respect. You may not always agree with your parents, but you are to obey them. You certainly may not always agree with your government and its leaders, but you are to pray for them. You may not agree with the elders or leaders, spiritual leaders in a church, but you are to obey them and pray for them. That is entitled respect. It is not your job or my job to remove the President of the United States or a king, or to remove a parent who is a leader in the home, or remove a leader in the church. God will take care of that. God will do his business. God will take care of that which he authorized. Entitled respect must be taught to our kids. And I'm afraid we've gotten away from that. And so our kids do not respect mom and dad at home. They do not respect governmental leaders, and they do not respect leaders in church. And that is a dangerous, dangerous place to be. Let me ask you another question. How can a husband disrespect his wife in front of his children, and then, as a father, demand that his children respect his position? Well, the answer is he can't. He simply can't. Or reverse it. How can a wife disrespect her husband in front of the children, then expect the kids to treat her right and treat her with entitled respect? Well, she can't. Entitled respect must be modeled, and it must be reinforced in the home. And you don't do that ever by disagreeing in front of your children. You are submarining both of your authority. When you argue, and especially about who has control in front of your children, you are telling your children, I know how to manipulate like either mom does or dad or both of them do. And you are confusing them about entitled respect in the home. Then there's earned respect. And earned respect comes from what we do. We gain it through our work, our service to God and others, our performance within the family unit. We build up chips, we often say. When we give due respect to those who have earned it or are entitled to it, we are in the process preparing the way for respect to come back around our way, because respect is indeed a two-way avenue. The third letter in our acrostic is O, and that stands for order in the family. Every family has to have order. Hugs and kisses and touch and affection are great. Treating others with respect, whether it's entitled or earned respect, is essential. But if the home is unorganized and chaotic, it's impossible to create a sweet-smelling family fragrance. Like any other institution or organization, the home requires a setting of order and peace in order to be effective, the task of passing on a solid heritage. Let me tell you what I worry about in today's homes and society. I think many homes today are at the mercy of the person who can yell the loudest, or argue the most persuasively, or cry the most convincingly. See, that's the problem you have when you have an emotion-centered only society. The people who can express the emotions the loudest, the longest, or the most convincingly can gain control. Instead, there should be order in the home. The home should be a place of calm, a safe place that is emotionally restful, a refuge, so to speak. So I want you to think, when we think about order in the home, I want you to think of three areas that begin with the letter R. The first is rule. Every home should have well-defined rules in the home. And if it doesn't, chaos is certain. Everybody must understand that certain actions are expected while other behaviors and actions simply will not be tolerated and will be addressed. The great experiment back in the middle part of the 20th century of permissive parenting has been proven to be a horrible flop, proven and even suggested so by the one who began it. Back in the mid-20th century, Dr. Benjamin Spock wrote the Baby and Child Care book, and it was the biggest bestseller for a decade. And he told all children, this baby doctor, about all parents about how to raise their children, and it was a very permissive-like system that he presented. And he realized years later, just before he died, it didn't work, and he said, parental firmness makes for a happier child. Children need borders well established. They need boundaries well established, giving them the security and the self-confidence to know where the boundaries are and not cross them without consequences. So every home should have a list of some rules, but not many. Not many. Let me just give some suggestions on this. Keep the list short. But kids don't need to be memorizing 10 or 12 or 15 things that they can or cannot do. Keep the list very short. The more rules, the less likely they'll be remembered, much less followed. And don't major on the minors. If you devise a list of nitpicky rules about things that don't really matter, your family fragrance will have more of the sense of regret and rigidity than it will a sweet-smelling aroma. Cover the important stuff, like treating others with respect, treating everybody in the family, especially honor your father and your mother with respect and dignity. Cleaning up after yourself, but allow some room for flexibility on non-essential matters. Let me tell you something drives me nuts. And with parents, and it's usually because the parent is angry about something. Punishing severely a child who has dropped something or made a mistake, a simple mistake, Man, you got to be careful about that. First of all, what you're teaching them is they get punished for making a mistake, and we're all in trouble. I'd have gotten whipped 4 or 5 times yesterday alone. I mean, there's a difference between willful disobedience and a 4-year-old's silliness and immaturity. And so we have to be very careful about that. And then we have to be consistent. If you create a rule for one, it's got to apply to all, and that includes mom and dad. I'll never forget what happened to me in Chapel Hill, Tennessee when I was a young preacher. I was probably 23 or 24 years old, and it made such an impact on me because I was just about to have my first child. One of our deacons pulled up to the church, and he went inside, and one of his teenage sons stayed outside and smoked a cigarette outside. He hit a cigarette. He didn't go into Sunday school, and he hit a cigarette outside, and the deacon went out and got him. And he punished him right there in front of everybody. And he was a smoker himself. He'd just put out his cigarette before he walked into the church building. If you're going to have rules, you got to be consistent. You can't say, do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work. So keep the list short, don't major on the minors, and be consistent. And then everybody has to have roles in the family. Every member of the family has a role to play, and they should make sure they know what their role is and do it. If those roles are not identified and clarified, there'll be a lot of chaos and confusion. Sometimes kids don't know what's expected of them. Let me tell you what mom and dad's roles are. Mom and dad's roles, God created the home, God created the government, God created the church. Mom and dad's role in the home is exactly the same as it is in the government. There's a legislative branch, there's an executive branch, and there is a judicial branch. And in the home government, mom and dad are the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Children are not judges in the home. They're not in the judicial branch. Children are not in the legislative. They're not the ones setting the rules. Children are not in the executive role in the home. Some are, but should not be in the executive role in the home. Mom and dad are the executive authority, the legislative authority, and the judicial authority. Children are citizens who have a voice in family affairs, but who must and should be listened to, but must ultimately appeal to and submit to the direction of their leaders. When that doesn't happen, you have anarchy and chaos, and the strongest personality takes over. Whether the strongest personality is a toddler with an attitude or a teenager with a mouth. Don't let that happen in your home. Establish clear roles for everybody to play, and they know what their role is. And then rights. Once you've established clear rules and roles, but only when you have established clear rules and roles, then every family member is to receive minimum rights. What are those rights? Everybody has a right to be listened to. Everybody has a right to express concerns in respectful tones. I'll never forget an incident that happened when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and it impacted me and almost turned me off to the church. My parents every year had a Christmas dinner for 10, 12 of their closest families from church in the month of December, and every year they would also invite the preacher and his wife, and the preacher was a well-learned man, and I was 11 or 12, and I had thought out a question that I thought was really, really important. I don't think it was really important. It was important. And I went over to him while he was eating dinner, And they all sat with these, the old tray table things. And I went up in front of his tray table and I asked this question. This was basically a theological question that he should have answered. And he said, you don't need to worry about that. You're too young. Just run along now. And the lady sitting next to him echoed him and said, oh, you're too young to be thinking about that even, Randy. Just run along. You tell somebody that enough, and what they do is just what you said. They run along. They move on to something else. So I've always told the kids when I was a youth minister and in every church I've ever been in, I'll answer, if I can, any question you have. No question is off limits. If you have a question about faith, you have a question that is important to you, it is important to me. That's giving people rights. That's what we should do in our home as well. Establish clear roles, and then let them have the right to ask questions. Order is such a critical element to a positive family fragrance. The fourth fragrance, I'm really stretching it, is merriment. It's the only synonym I could find for fun. Fun. A healthy dose of fun in the home is good medicine. The home should be a place of joy and laughter. There is nothing quite as sad as a home that is hungry for laughter and joy and can't get it and is starving. The Bible says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And we almost always apply that verse just to our individual lives, but you can also apply that verse to our homes. A cheerful heart will be like good medicine in a home. It'll produce an environment of fun and laughter and joy. And a crushed spirit in the home just grinds a home to death. Find something that produces a fun environment. If you need to have a weekly or monthly game night, or if you need to have just a joke night, or whatever it is, find something that produces fun and joy in the home. Because it's during times of joy and fun that barriers and walls come down and bridges go up. It really is. I mean, walls are built in the home with anger and bitterness and unforgiveness and no joy. And bridges are built in a home with joy and mercy and grace and forgiveness and fun. Find a way to have merriment in your home. And the final fragrance that is so important is affirmation. Kids need to be told, you can do it. I'm proud of you. Let me help you. Cheer up. I know you'll give it your best. You're first string on my team. Kids need the kind of statements that will help build their sense of self-worth and build confidence and create a sweet-smelling family fragrance. Now, you know what they've said. The studies have shown that people need, and particularly children, they need 10 positive affirmations for every one negative affirmation. But I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that number way low. And I can tell you from a personal experience, I'm really not sensitive-spirited at all. I'm not. I've been used to criticism all my life. I mean, I was a football coach, a basketball referee, and a preacher. All I've ever been. Those are the only three jobs I've ever had. and criticism comes with those three territories. And I'm not very sensitive, but I can tell you what happens even with me. If 41 people walk by me on a Sunday morning and 40 of them say something positive about the message and one says something slightly critical, which one do you think I'll focus on? So if you say 40 extremely positive things to your child and one that is a little too hostile, a little too bad, which thing is the one you think they'll focus on? And they're immature. I'm not saying we can't ever say negative things to our children. Don't get out of here and misquote me. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have to be conscious of the negative effect of negative or bad statements with our kids. We just do. That's affirmation. So, a final word to each member in the family, and now I'll close. Life's a lot like a boomerang. What you give in your family is likely what you'll get in return. It's not always true, but I'm telling you, in my experience, I've seen it be true nearly all the time. You give love and forgiveness and joy and positivity, and you'll get it back. You give anger and impatience and unforgiveness and manipulation, and you'll get it back. The main reason you will is because it's a universal spiritual law. In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7, a man reaps what he sows. So it's a universal law. So keep that in mind relating to what we've talked about today. You're usually going to get back what you give. One of the best stories I've ever heard tell that. A little boy's mother had just yelled at him and got him upset, and she had disciplined him, and he ran outside the house and over to a hill, had a valley down below it, and he shouted out from the hill to get back at his mother and release some of his anger. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. He didn't understand the science of echoes. What came back at him was, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. It scared him to death, a little 9-year-old. He ran back to the house and ran into his mom, and he said, Mom, there's a mean old man in the woods, and he's yelling, I hate you, at me. And she said, well, let's go see. And as she got close to the edge of the hill, she realized what had happened. And she said, I tell you what, listen to what I will do, and let's see what happens. And she yelled out, I love you, I love you, I love you. And what came back to her was, I love you, I love you, I love you. And she used that teaching moment to teach that little 9-year-old boy, what you give, you get back. What you reap, you sow. You reap, you sow hate, you reap hate. You sow love, you get love. You sow a bad smell in your family, you're going to get a bad aroma back. You sow God's way in your family, you'll get a sweet smelling fragrance back.